Tippy time, my damies, Topcat here and welcome back to the channel. Today's build is called Viking Funeral. This build reminds me of D1's Warlocks of old. The Solar Warlock just got dialed up as Bungie have gone and buffed the Phoenix Dive, and with the artifact we gain the firebolts that are not just better, these things are the tits. Now I know most Solar Warlocks find it hard to put down the Starfire protocol. I've consistently played Nightfalls against them this week, but in every single in-game report I would either double or sometimes triple their kills. This build has a consistent barrage of abilities just spilling out of you. With 5 ability attacks dealing Scorch, ignitions don't come much easier. Also, unlike the Starfire protocol, we don't need to use the Empowering Rift. This build has access to multiple cures and a ×2 restoration bonus that it refreshes with ease. If you enjoy this build, like, share, sub. With that aside, let's begin the build with the claws of ahamkara. They grant us a second melee charge. Now I'm running 80 strength for a melee cooldown of 53 seconds. However, because of how this build is run, we have that melee charge back almost immediately. The second charge is here for 2 reasons. Firstly, to make sure that we have no ability downtime. But secondly, double melee deals enough Scorch to ignite unstopped champs while still feeding us back a charge. The Incinerator Snap has been my melee of choice over the Celestial Fire. It has 4 projectiles that shoot out in a line, fanning out to produce more Scorch damage across more targets. Celestial Fire's cooldown is a little too high for me, and although it is better at single target ignitions, the Incinerator Snap does have some tracking also, so all 4 projectiles can be targeted at a single target if required. Heat Rises is our first aspect. When we hold down our grenade button, we consume our grenade and we are granted Heat Rises. Whilst this is active, we can fire our weapons, melee, and throw out grenades whilst we soar through the sky. This has a 15-second timer, but every time we kill, this gets extended and maxes out at 30 seconds. By consuming our grenade, we are also granted Cure ×2, which will fully heal us. With our grenades having the best cooldown in the game, this is great for clutch heals. Please note, however, if done whilst Heat Rise is already active, it will reset the timer back to 15 seconds. The second crucial trait here in Heat Rises is that final blows whilst we're airborne grant us melee energy. This is extremely strong. Now, several of you might not feel too comfortable floating around the arena. If this isn't for you, all you need to do to get that melee juice is to do a little bunny hop every time you snap your fingers and you'll get that melee charge. This build doesn't use any melee kickstarts, and just look how quick they come back. Emperor Torches, our powered melee attacks against Cabannons make you and nearby allies gain a radiant damage bonus for 9 seconds. Whilst we are radiant, our weapons pierce anti-barrier shields and stun them, but if we're using a rocket, you just straight up delete them. Ember of Searing, defeating Scorched targets grants us melee energy and creates us Fire Sprites. Fire Sprites have a 5-second cooldown timer and will return a third of your grenade charge. But with the amount of Scorch this build is creating, you'll have so many of these just laying around, the difficulty is often just walking straight past them. But not to worry, as with all that melee energy you got, they'll never be far away if they are required. By now, of course, you've noted that we are using the Firebolt grenade. At 90 discipline, its base cooldown is 36 seconds. It shoots out 2 projectiles with a low Scorch value, but this season's artifact gives us Rain of Firebolts. This gives us access to a second Firebolt charge. Because we have a second charge, it's now more cost effective than ever before to operate out a Heat Rises aspect, and a cheaper cost to cure ourselves with those grenades. Not to mention, whilst we have now activated our Heat Rises and are now floating in the sky, we've actually got a grenade handy to rain down fire from above. Now, I'm not sure why Bungo split these up, as you wouldn't run one without the other. Flare Up is what makes this build all come together. This takes our Firebolt grenades from a low Scorch to a medium Scorch, allowing us to pair a grenade with either a melee or a Phoenix Dive to activated ignition. And for good measure, it also spawns a Fire Sprite near to them to save us 12 seconds of cooldown. The Touch of Flame aspect is going to increase the range at which the Firebolts can reach, and give us another Firebolt in that grenade. More bolts means more Scorch. Now, Phoenix Dive really is the jelly in this jam donut. Long press your class button to dive from the heavens. This applies a medium scorch stack. Pair this with either your grenade or your melee for an easy ignition against all your foes. And with all the variants at your disposal, it's never been more enjoyable to stun a champ with an even larger radius this season. It's also way better than a rift in my opinion, as it has 2 forms of healing whilst allowing you to stay in the fight. When we dive down we get cured ×2, this fully heals us. Secondly, we are granted restoration ×2 for 5 seconds, which is great as we are diving straight into the thickest shit. I also use the well in a similar fashion. I drop a grenade or a melee, then dig my flaming sword deep into the ground. Ember of Imperium is really vital to this build's playability. Our solar weapon or any of our many ability final blows will extend the duration of radiance and restoration. So when I enter arena, I'll start by consuming my grenade to get heat rises. Throw out a melee to get the radiance, then Phoenix dive on them to get the restoration. The ignition then kills them and pushes out both my radiance and restoration timers to 13 seconds. And this keeps on getting refreshed as long as we keep on killing. Now Ember Singeing may be our last fragment, but it is vital for this build. Your class ability recharges faster when you scorch targets. The Phoenix Dive standard charge is 55 seconds, I'm running 90 recovery to bring it to 31 seconds. But with Ember Surging we can close that gap right up to about 8 seconds. Now before we get into the mods we need to touch base on the artifacts. Authorized mods solar will make our solar mods cheaper. Shadow Orbs is S tier, making us an orb on each initial shield break from a matching subclass. This can be using either a weapon or ability. Authorized mods grenades will take any of our grenade mods cost down to 1. And Solar Surge will make it so every time we collect a fire spray, not only do we collect a third of our grenade charge, we will also acquire 1 armor charge. Now before you ask, stacks on stacks doesn't work together with this, just so you know. Our mods begin with our Solar Siphon. This will make you an orb across multiple weapon kills with a solar weapon. Now normally I would say use whatever is your primary weapon, but you do need to be using a solar weapon as this makes Ember of Imperium work to its full potential. If we're not chaining restoration and radiance, this build will lose a lot of its potency. Heavy Handed will generate an orb of power for every melee kill we get. This is easily the most common orb we are creating. Stacks on stacks will give us 2 armor charges for the price of 1. And charged up is going to allow us to carry 4 stacks of charge. We use our charge in 2 places. Firstly, Utility Kickstart can return us heaps of Phoenix Dive juice straight back to us. This ability keeps us alive, so I want it the most. And when we dive, the Bomber mod on our class item is also going to inject some grenade juice into us. Our aspects and fragments cycle off each other, so I want our mods to do the same. Impact Induction, causing damage with our melee attack reduces our grenade cooldown. Thanks to Heat Rises, our melee is our predominant ability, so all should feed off its hunger. Focusing Strike, this will grant us class ability energy simply by causing damage with our melee. And being that our melee lingers, it pushes that cooldown high. On our legs, I'm running Innovation. This too reduces our grenade cooldown each time we pick up an orb of power. It took me quite some time to get this build's cooldown sorted together. With all the fragments, I think I got it sitting fairly pretty now. So at all times, you should only be a second or 2 from having 2 abilities to ignite and scorch all your foes. I'm using Solar Surge as we are locked into using a solar weapon with this build. I found that 1 mod was sufficient for this build, as we pretty much have Radiance up full time anyway. If doing boss battles, you could slot in a second mod in place of the Innovation, but personally I found it was sufficient. I think it's important with every build you know what its strengths are and embellish them. If we try and do too much, you end up taking away from somewhere else. Prometheus Lens went and got goated when we weren't looking. This thing is the perfect weapon for this build, as it doesn't have recoil, stupid good at ranges, and reloads itself on kills. It also steadily applies Scorch, so you can just chuck out 1 ability, apply Scorch, and we got popcorn. Hell, if you've even got the ammo to spare, you can unstop with it. You're going to want a special ammo finder. 2 of them is better. I'm actually running a double special build with the Riptide. Mine has both Wallball for boss battles, and Chill Clip is great for stunning overload champs by slowing them. chuck a few more bolts out there, and then we can freeze them off to combat those unstops. Our last mods are our concussives. Being that we're diving in balls deep into danger all the time, we need to alleviate some of that pressure. Now personally, I haven't spec'd for resilience, as I've got cure and the restoration at my disposal. I've spec'd towards recovery, discipline and strength. Anyway, my damies, this build is goated. It's been 8 years since I've had this much fun on my solo warlock, and I'm giving everyone a Viking funeral with it. I'll make sure to leave a dim in the description below. Thumb it if you liked it. Feel free to comment down below if you've got any questions or suggestions. And until next time, tippy tie my damies, what a tie.